Smith's 52mm bimetallic gauges. I'm going to talk about this range here. We've got fuel gauge, oil, well this is water temperature and that one is oil temperature. They're 52mm because that is the size of the hole in your dashboard that you need. They actually measure about 56mm going across the bezel. So first of all we'll just take a standard gauge and we'll have a look what we've got. Obviously this is a fuel gauge. In the packet will come some instructions and the fittings that you need. So there's the bracket, the mounting bracket, and the small lamp that fits in the lamp holder at the back, like so. I've bunched these together because these gauges all work at 10 volts, and obviously the reason for that is your car's producing a variable amount of voltage, and these gauges would give you a false reading if they're measuring at 12 and you're giving it 14 or 10 volts. So what you have to have with these gauges is a voltage stabilizer. Now, previously these weren't earth sensitive, they are now. So if it's a negative earth car, you have to have a negative earth one, positive earth, vice versa. 2 terminals, and they're marked I and B. And simply I goes to the instrument and B goes to your battery, preferably through a fuse to your fuse board or whatever. So that's the wiring for those, and these need to be earthed as well. So you need to attach that to earth, and that is the feed and stabilization to the gauge. That applies, as I said earlier, fuel gauge, temperature gauges, oil or water. With the fuel gauge, obviously you need a sender. Now, if you've got a early 1950s car, the chances are your fuel gauge will be a moving coil type, and we'll come on to those later on. But you can't use your old moving coil tank sender with the modern gauge. These things have to match. And there are a number of different ranges available. Fords use a completely different setup to Smith's instruments, which were typical on most British cars of the 60s and 70s and 50s. Jaeger gauges, British Jaeger gauges, they use the same sender units. Curiously enough, most modern Japanese cars use the same ones as well. But they have to match, and for this gauge we have 2 adjustable tank senders. Just get one out. Again, you've got the instructions come with them. Plastic float these days, a long arm, but you can adjust this yourself to size and shape it, bend it like your old one. Right, we've got the traditional, since the probably 20s for Smiths, 6-hole fitting, pretty much standard on absolute stacks and stacks of Smith's instruments on cars. This one is a side mounting one, so it's sweep up and down in the tank. And wiring wise for these, you've simply got 2 terminals on here. One is going to the instrument and one is going to earth. So that sits in your tank, having adjusted it. Goes to the gauge. The gauge is fed with 10 volts from that. Now these temperature gauges, very simple really. You just need to know that they're fed from the same voltage stabilizer. 2 terminals, power to one side, and the other side simply goes to your sender unit in the radiator, in the head, wherever it happens to be. There are 2 sizes, a coarse thread and a fine thread. and that pretty much is on most 60s, 70s, 50s cars. So that's the range of 52mm bimetallic Smith's instruments.